On my wedding day, my brother pulled me aside and whispered, "You have 10 minutes to transfer your savings to me, or I'll ruin everything." I laughed, thinking he was bluffing. But when I walked down the aisle, my groom's face told me he wasn't. Then my maid of honor stood up and said, "Actually, we have a surprise for you." My brother's face went pale. My wedding day should have been the happiest day of my life. I had spent months planning everything down to the smallest detail. The venue, a beautiful estate just outside of Atlanta, Georgia, the dress, perfect, my soon-to-be husband, Ryan, the love of my life. But just 10 minutes before I was supposed to walk down the aisle, my older brother, Nick, pulled me aside and whispered in my ear, "You have 10 minutes to transfer all your savings to me, or I'll ruin everything." I thought he was joking. Nick had always been the kind of guy who made inappropriate jokes at the worst times, so I just rolled my eyes and told him to get lost. But then I saw his face, and that's when I realized he was dead serious. Let me back up a little. Nick was the favorite child, the one who could do no wrong, the one my parents threw money at even when he made the worst life choices imaginable. Meanwhile, I worked my ass off to get scholarships, pay my way through college, and build a life for myself. When Nick racked up $50,000 in gambling debt, my parents paid it off. When he got caught cheating on his wife for the third time, they still took his side and blamed the women. And when he lost his job again, my mom called me begging me to help my brother out. I refused. I had spent years watching Nick manipulate everyone around him, and I wasn't going to be his ATM. But my parents kept sending him money, even after he drained their retirement fund. So when he showed up at my wedding, I should have known he had something planned. After Nick gave me his ridiculous demand, I walked away. There was no way I was giving him a single cent. But as I stepped down the aisle and saw Ryan's face, my stomach dropped. Something was wrong. Ryan wasn't smiling, he wasn't even looking at me. Instead, his jaw was clenched, his hands were balled into fists, and his eyes were locked onto Nick. Then my maid of honor, Laura, stood up and said, "Actually, we have a surprise for you." Nick's face turned pale. The doors burst open, and in walked two men in suits. Then everything went to hell. The entire room turned to look as the two men in suits marched down the aisle. They weren't smiling, they weren't wedding guests. I turned to Ryan silently, begging him to tell me what was going on, but his jaw was locked so tight I thought his teeth might crack. One of the men, the taller one with a shaved head, pulled out a badge. Gasps rippled through the crowd. My mom clutched her pearls, my dad stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. Nick tried to run, but before he could take 2 steps, the other agent, a stocky man with a scar on his cheek, grabbed him by the arm and yanked him back. "Nick Carter, you are under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and extortion. You have the right to remain silent." The words blurred, my ears rang. I turned to Ryan again, looking for answers, but before he could say anything, my mother lunged at the agent. "This is a mistake," she screamed. "He's a good boy, he would never." The agent barely flinched. "Ma'am, step back." But she wasn't done. "This is her fault," she spat, her face twisting into something ugly. "You put them up to this, didn't you? You always wanted to ruin him." I couldn't even process what she was saying. Ryan was the one who snapped. "Are you kidding me right now?" His voice was low, dangerous. "Your son stole from me, from us. He used my name to open credit cards, drained our honeymoon fund, and then tried to blackmail your daughter for more. And you're blaming her?" My mom's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Nick was struggling against the agents, shaking his head frantically. "Ryan, man, we can fix this. Come on, don't let them do this. It's just money, just money." I had to grip the back of a chair to steady myself. Nick stole from Ryan, my future husband, the man I loved, and then had the audacity to ask me for more. And my parents, they weren't even surprised. Then I realized they knew. I took a slow, shaky breath, and then my father spoke for the first time. His voice was eerily calm. "If you let them take him, we're done. You won't be our daughter anymore." Silence. Every single person in the room was holding their breath. Then Laura, my best friend, my ride or die, let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me." She stepped up beside me, arms crossed, chin lifted. "Nick stole thousands of dollars, lied, and tried to ruin her wedding, and your response is to disown the victim?" She turned to me. "If you ever wondered whether or not these people actually loved you, well, here's your answer." My heart felt like it had been ripped out of my chest, but before I could even react, my mother's next words cut even deeper. "We never wanted you anyway." The entire room fell into stunned silence, and then all at once, chaos erupted. Nick was shouting, still struggling against the agents. My mother was sobbing, throwing herself into my father's arms. My father just stood there, cold and silent. Guests were murmuring, some standing, some looking away in discomfort. And me? I felt nothing. Maybe because I had spent my whole life suspecting this was the truth. Maybe because deep down, I knew I had always been the outsider in my own family. But hearing it out loud on my wedding day, in front of everyone, that's when something inside me snapped. I straightened my back, squared my shoulders, and looked my parents dead in the eye. Then I guess this is goodbye. I turned away, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look back. As I turned away from my parents, my chest felt tight, but I refused to cry, not in front of them, not after everything. But just when I thought the worst was over, Nick made his final move. He stopped struggling against the FBI agents, went completely still, and then turned to Ryan with a smirk. "You think you know everything, huh?" Ryan's hands clenched at his sides, but he didn't respond. Nick let out a low chuckle. "You sure you want to marry her, man? 'Cause I know something that might change your mind." A murmur spread through the guests. The FBI agents hesitated, watching closely. I went ice cold. "Nick, Shut up, I said, but he ignored me. Ryan, you ever wonder why she's been so secretive about her job? Why she never lets you see her bank statements? My stomach twisted. Ryan's jaw tightened. What the hell are you talking about? Nick turned back to me, his smirk growing. You want to tell him, sis, or should I? My whole body was on fire now. You're just trying to cause problems, I said. Nothing you say is true. Nick shook his head. That's not a denial. I wanted to rip his throat out, but I knew exactly what he was doing. Nick was cornered, he knew the FBI had him, so now his only goal was to burn everything down with him. I turned to Ryan, trying to keep my voice steady. Don't listen to him, he's just trying to mess with us, Nick laughed. Oh, really? Then you won't mind if I tell him about that little offshore account you've got, the one with over $300,000 in it. The entire room fell silent. Ryan's eyes snapped to mine. What? The air left my lungs. Nick was lying, I said quickly. You know he is. But Ryan didn't look at Nick, he was looking at me, and that was when I realized he wasn't 100% sure I was telling the truth. My throat tightened. Nick saw it too, he grinned like a shark. Oh, she didn't tell you, he let out a mock gasp. Wow, guess that means she doesn't trust you. But hey, if you don't believe me, check for yourself. Ask her for her banking info, see if she lets you. My entire body was screaming. I wanted to fight, I wanted to slap the smug look off his face. But instead, I did the worst thing possible, I hesitated. It was only for a second, but that second was enough. Ryan took a slow step back. His eyes darkened, telling me he thought I was lying. My throat felt like sandpaper. I opened my mouth, closed it. Nick smirked. Oh, that's rough, man. Laura stepped in. Ryan, come on, you're really going to believe him? But Ryan wasn't looking at her, he was looking at me, and he wasn't blinking. I had to say something, so I swallowed hard and forced the words out. It's not what you think. Ryan let out a low, humorless laugh. Then what is it? My pulse pounded in my ears. Here's the truth, Nick wasn't lying. The offshore account was real, the money was real. But how I got it, that was the part that would change everything. I looked around the room. My parents were still watching, my mother's face was streaked with tears, my father stone cold. The FBI agents were standing by, waiting to drag Nick out. My bridesmaids were frozen in place, their eyes darting between me and Ryan like they were watching a slow-motion car crash. And Ryan looked like he had no idea who I was anymore. I took a shaky breath. I was going to tell you after the wedding, I whispered. Ryan's jaw twitched. Tell me now. I had no choice, so I squared my shoulders and said the words that would change everything. That money, it came from my grandmother. Ryan blinked. Your grandmother? I nodded. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to keep going. Before she died, she left me something, not just money, documents, information. Nick's smirk vanished. Shut up, he said, but I ignored him. She knew things about my parents, about my brother, about the people they were involved with. Ryan's face was unreadable now. The guests were silent, even the FBI agent seemed interested. I swallowed. The money is real, Ryan, but it's not stolen. It was an inheritance. My grandmother hid it because she knew if my family found out, they'd try to take it. Nick was shaking his head now, his face red. You're lying, he said, but he knew I wasn't because he'd tried to get that money himself and had failed. Ryan exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. I could see the war in his head, the love he had for me battling against the sudden doubt, the fear that he had just walked into a marriage with someone keeping secrets. I reached out for his hand. Ryan, please. I wanted to tell you, I swear. But before he could answer, the front door slammed open again. And then a man I hadn't seen in years walked in, a man I thought was dead. And the second my father saw him, his face turned the same shade of pale as Nick's. My stomach dropped because I finally understood that my family's secrets ran even deeper than I thought. The moment he walked in, the entire room seemed to shrink. The murmur stopped, the tension, already thick enough to suffocate me, turned into something sharp, something cutting. The man standing in the doorway was tall, older, but unmistakable, my uncle, my father's brother, a man I hadn't seen since I was 12, a man who was supposed to be dead. I heard my mother whisper, no, 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 no. I turned to my father, his hands were clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. He looked like he had just seen a ghost, maybe because to him, he had. Uncle David took a slow step forward, scanning the room, taking it all in. His eyes landed on Nick, then shifted to me. And when he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost amused. Wow, you people haven't changed a bit. Nick struggled harder against the FBI agents. What the hell are you doing here, David? David ignored him and kept walking, slow and steady, until he was standing a few feet away from my father. Surprised to see me, Richard? My father's lip curled. You're supposed to be rotting in a ditch somewhere. David let out a dry laugh. Yeah, that's what you wanted, isn't it? He glanced at me. She doesn't know, does she? My skin prickled. No, what? David's eyes softened just for a second before he looked back at my father. You never told her what really happened to me, did you? My father stayed silent. David shook his head. Of course you didn't. Then he turned back to me. Your father and Nick tried to have me killed. The words sliced through the air like a blade. I stared at David, waiting for him to laugh, to say it was some cruel joke, but he didn't. I turned to my father, waiting for him to deny it, but he didn't. The weight of it crushed my chest. David exhaled sharply, glancing at the crowd, then back at me. I knew things I wasn't supposed to know about their business, the people they were working with. I was going to expose them. My stomach twisted. Expose them for what? David's jaw tightened. Money laundering, fraud, deals with some very, very dangerous people. I looked at my father again, hoping for some kind of outburst, some furious denial, but he just stared at David, seething, which meant it was true. A sick feeling spread through me. David kept going. They couldn't let me talk, so they set me up. They made it look like I was the criminal, then they arranged for me to have a little accident on the way to prison. I swallowed hard. But you survived. David nodded. Yeah, it took me years to gather the proof I needed, but I've got it now. He turned to the FBI agents, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a flash drive. And I'd like to make a deal. My mother gasped, no, no, no. My father lunged forward, but the agents were faster. In a second, one of them was grabbing his wrist, twisting his arm behind his back, forcing him to his knees. Nick was shouting now, you son of a. You can't do this. David just looked at him, pity flashing across his face. You did this to yourself, Nick. Nick thrashed against the agents, his voice rising in desperation. Mom, Dad, do something. My mother sobbed, reaching for him, but the agents were already hauling him toward the door. And just like that, it was over. The parents who had spent their entire lives covering for him couldn't save him now. I watched as the officers escorted my brother out, his face red with rage, and then my father. My mother collapsed onto the floor, screaming. I didn't move to help her. The silence that followed was heavy. I felt lightheaded, like I had been holding my breath for hours. Ryan was still beside me, but he hadn't said a word, not since I admitted the money was real. I turned to him. My heart thumping, I whispered, Ryan? He met my eyes, and for the first time since this all started, I couldn't read him. Do you love me? His expression flickered. I don't know who you are. It felt like someone had punched me in the gut. I swallowed hard. I never lied to you. I just. He shook his head. You kept things from me, big things, and I don't know if I can marry someone who does that. I sucked in a sharp breath. I did it to protect myself, Ryan. He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. I need time. I nodded slowly, my chest aching. Take all the time you need. The wedding was over, the guests were gone. Laura stayed with me as I sat in my wedding dress in an empty reception hall, my hands shaking. David walked up to me and sat down. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, he said softly. I let out a bitter laugh. At least I know the truth now. David exhaled. And what are you going to do with it? I stared at the table, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I had no family left, my father and brother were on their way to prison. My mother would never forgive me, and Ryan, I didn't know if he'd ever come back. I had spent my entire life fighting to be free from my family's control. Now I finally was, and yet I had never felt so alone. I took a deep breath, wiped the tears from my eyes, and stood up. I stared over at David, pride flickered in his eyes. Good, he said. You deserve better than them. I turned to Laura. Come on, let's go get drunk. She grinned. Now you're talking. As I walked out of that hall, I didn't look back. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what came next.